Hi, welcome to The Funding Blueprint, Unlocking Startup Success, presented by StartHub. I'm Cody Goff, and today you're going to learn how being really specific can help your startup stand out from the crowd. You'll also learn how investors value co-founders and some of the most common traits that investors see in successful startups. My guest today is Andrew Ackerman, a consultant turned serial entrepreneur turned angel, then family office director, and now a VC investor. He has more than a decade of startup investing experience and over 70 investments, going from a generalist to specializing in edtech to now investing in PropTech and construction tech. Stay tuned to hear some fun stories about co-founders, but we started our conversation by zooming in on something that Andrew finds pretty valuable. Thanks for joining me, Andrew. I'm really excited to talk to you because you've invested in a lot of companies, but on your LinkedIn profile specifically, you say straight up, quote, "I believe in platforms." So let's start there. What's so special about platforms?
Platforms is one of those horribly abused words, so I should probably define the term. By platform, I mean, it's more than just, hey, we're two guys that are like hyper connected. We can make a whole bunch of introductions for you. Maybe we were founders ourselves, right? So let's take it up a level, right? So when I invest in a company, I tell my startups or potential startups, I want them to be a quantum level better than the competition. I want them to be visibly and obviously different. Like, think 8 seconds. What makes you awesome? Right? The time it takes a person to walk past your booth at a trade show. And that's my bar for investing in a startup. But then I look at myself, I look at my peers in the VC world, and all our websites are the same damn thing, just with a different logo on it. We're a couple of guys, ex-founders. We can make a lot of value-add introductions for you. We can be, super helpful. Like, okay, just like everybody else. So how do I, as a VC, eat my own dog food? The only way I know how to do that, and there's a bunch of them, but the way I know how to do it basically is to do something more than that. So a platform can take a lot of different forms, but it's something that you do that makes you more valuable than just the things I've mentioned. So it could be, in the case of Dream it could be a later stage accelerator program, right? You come into the program, we'll work with you for 3-6 months, however long it is, and get you a whole bunch of customers, a whole bunch of investors. And the more granular you can get, the more powerful it is. So let's go super deep, and then I'll pause for breath. If one of the value props that a VC says is, hey, Cody, I can introduce you to a bunch of potential customers. Okay, that sounds pretty good. Of course, you've heard that from 5 other funds. On the other hand, if a company like Dream or like Reach, which is the program that one of the programs I'm working with now, if they come to you and say, hey, Cody, I have a 2-week customer sprint program where I can set you up with face-to-face meetings with a dozen or 2 dozen plus one-to-one meetings with customers that have chosen to meet with you. I offered to give them 6 or 7 startups I'm working with, but they chose your company to meet with. What's more valuable? Hey, I can make a bunch of introductions versus 2 weeks face-to-face, 10, 20, qualified introductions. That's the difference between 2 guys and a VC fund and a platform.
And it's important to you that a company be able to articulate this really quickly, let's say at a trade show or on their website. Is there a special sauce to that? Like there's certain, there's certain website templates a lot of companies will use.
Cool.
Do they have to hire a designer or developer to make it totally bespoke?
No,
kind of
like a designer can make crap look nice, but it doesn't. You still have crap, right? So, number one, you have to have something that makes you special and different. Right? And there's a lot of startups out there when you dig into it, there's nothing there. Doesn't mean, by the way, you can be a Me Too, same, and still succeed, but you don't have any edge, right? I'm looking for loaded dice. I'm looking for companies that have edge. So I will pass on, very interesting founders who are doing something interesting if it's a crowded field and I don't know why they're going to be the winner. Right. So nothing makes me happier that people succeeding even after I passed on them. Happier if I bet on them. Yeah. But I'm very happy if they prove me wrong that way. But I'm looking for ones that have an unfair advantage. So if you have that, then the next step is how do you communicate it? So you've heard a lot of talk about the elevator pitch. I'm sure the reason we love an elevator pitch isn't just that we are, professionally rewarded for having ADD, but it's because it tells me that you, Cody, know what makes your business awesome, right? By forcing you into that 20 to 30 seconds, you got to hit me with what you actually do, right? What about what you do is unique and different and valued by your customers, who your customers are, right? Give me that. And sometimes that's always obvious. How big your market is, and then what traction you have. Because by the way, if you don't tell me that, I'll assume you have none. So you got to get those 5 things into 20 to 30 seconds, and it's totally doable. But how a startup does that proves to me that they know what makes them special and unique. And just to extend that a little bit, the one pager that we used to all ask for, and I still like it, but I will acknowledge that it's become less and less common. It's kind of like the cummerbund at formal events. Like you still see it. You're like, oh, that guy's old school. The beauty of a one pager isn't that paper's expensive. It's that by forcing you into that constrained 8x10 with, by the way, decent sized fonts and a lot of white space, it proves to me that you know what makes you awesome, and you know not to dwell on the other stuff, right? You know what's not as important. And that's shockingly rare.
Interesting. It's just the simple creed, know thyself, essentially, right?
Yeah. Have something special about yourself, know what it is, and then, find a way to tell me it. And
yeah. Now, you've invested in a variety of verticals, particularly the ones that jump out are edtech, PropTech, which for the listener who's unaware stands for property technology, meaning any technology-powered system, device, or product that improves how people interact with buildings. And then construction tech, which I think is probably self-explanatory. Is there any difference across categories when evaluating companies?
Oh yeah, but it's all really the same, except when it's totally different. How's that for vague? So fundamental rules still apply. So I visualize whenever I look at a startup, the analogy I have in my mind is that it's a chain, not a rope. And I'll explain what I mean there. If a rope has a couple of strayed, strands to it, a couple of broken strands, the rope still holds. But if you have a chain and any one link is broken, chain doesn't work. So a startup has to have solid links for every critical part of its deck. So the problem, the solution, the market needs to be big enough. Their go-to-market needs to make sense and be economically viable. They have to have that quantum level improvement over their competition. Their team needs to be the right team. All those things need to be the case. If any one of them is not, then the startup's not going to work. It doesn't matter how much stronger the other ones are. It's a chain, not a rope. So that's the same. The other kind of overarching implicit question is why now? Right? There's so many very smart, very hungry founders out there. The moment something's technically possible, could be a technical advancement like a generative AI, or before that machine vision, or before that at the same time blockchain. All those things made things possible that weren't available 2 or 3 years earlier. Great. Or it could be regulatory changes, or it could be any one of anything else, but it has to be a concrete discontinuity that suddenly, oh, you couldn't do that before. So I'm looking for that. Now that's the same if it's edtech. That's the same if it's PropTech, same if it's construction tech. On the edtech side, COVID arguably was one of that. It suddenly got people off their butts to do remote learning. As a practical matter, we've kind of got back on our butts now. And it's not that much of a phase change, but it was a reasonable argument to make. On the construction tech side, on the other side, you might say it's things like the prevalence now of software such as Procore, which is kind of run your entire GC business on. Like now that we have that, you can add other tools on top of it, and you have a certain base level of data that you didn't have before. So those are the kind of things. It's a different what if, or series of what ifs for different industries. but the basic tools for looking at a startup and saying, oh my God, that's so bad, I just threw up in my mouth. Like, that's the same regardless of industry.
I love that you mentioned that once a new tech comes out or a new capability, lots of startups jump on it. What happens if 5 startups come knocking on your door in the same week and say, we've got a solution to this exact problem and we're going to use AI or something like that?
Yeah.
How do you, distinguish which one's the winner?
Well, so first of all, if they all come to me in the same week, they're either shocked to hear that anyone else is doing it or are convinced that the other 4 stole their idea. But it isn't, right? It's like parallel evolution, right? I mean, there's just law of large numbers. So many smart, hungry people, they're gonna come up on the same, similar combinations. So those are good problems, but it's never 100% the same, right? So one of the easy differences is team, right? You look at the team. Do they have any prior startup experience, right? And in rank order of desirability, successful exits, failing that, unsuccessful exits or smaller exits, right? They learned a lot there on someone else's dime. Failed startups, again, they learned something. Now they bring the benefit of that wisdom to me. Any kind of entrepreneurial venture, that helps too, right? Just being able to hold your pen out and say, Cody, I want you to sign this contract, and not putting it down until you do. Like, not everybody has that in their DNA. And then alongside that, in addition to that, like a lot of experience in their field, because sometimes there's certain industries that are just not very friendly to people who don't come up from within. So those are I'm looking for. And usually, the teams are not equivalent. Then there's the intangibles, which also belong with teams. Like, are they coachable? Do I feel like they're listening? Do I feel like they have well-reasoned but loosely held opinions? I don't want someone who's a weather vane, and I don't want someone who's just like, just write me the check and let me do what I want to do. So those are a lot of the deciding factors. And then within it, they might have the same solution, but how they want to go to the market. Like, oh, we're going to tackle the very largest customers first, or we're going to go after the small and mid-sized guys first, or we're going to go direct to consumer. Like, it's very rarely an exact apples to apple comparison.
When talking about the teams, obviously experience matters, but how about, what are the chances for that American dream, upstart young kid that comes from nothing and just has the amazing idea, but you look at his history and not a lot of startup experience. Is there still room for that in today's economy and attitude?
It still happens, but it's also not the best way to bet. All right. So it's like, do you have walk-ins at, large sports schools that suddenly make the team? Yeah, it happens. How often does it happen? Pretty rare. And one of the key differences is if I'm getting involved in the earliest stage, it would be like me picking somebody for a walk-in before they even got onto the court. Right. Now, if I'm investing in like a Series A or Series B a little later and they've made good progress, I'm like, wow, like this walk-on can play. But the earlier you are, you don't even have that. So it's almost a total guess. But sometimes it makes sense. Like, maybe they have a technical breakthrough that no one else has, and they've never done a startup before, but they seem very bright. They seem very coachable. They seem very amenable to being, matched up with other people. Think of that.
So maybe your advice to a first-time founder that's real young, hasn't done a lot of it before, is find somebody to if they've got a great idea, sell that idea to someone who they can put on their team that does have that experience. Maybe you see their CMO has done a bunch of startups, and that can help alleviate some of that.
So you actually used exactly the right word. You said sell that to someone else. I always tell people that their co-founder is their first sale, because you're basically, this is my baby. My baby's really cute. Instead of having a baby of your own, you should adopt mine. So that's a big sale. And if you can get the right co-founder on, someone who corresponds, like meshes with skills that you don't have, it makes you so much more marketable. Just in general, like solo founders are tough. There's way too much work for one person to be doing it. And even more subtly, like, you could hire other people. But a co-founder will say, like, Cody, you're full of crap, man. That makes no sense. An employee can't do that. So just having someone who forces you to say something out loud, forces you to articulate it, forces you to defend it, makes the quality of your decision so much better. So get a co-founder, number one. Number two, get a co-founder that complements you rather than has like the same skills, in which case, big deal, right? And if you can actually sell someone that has that fills the deficits in your team as a whole, that's awesome. Because I'm looking for a team that's awesome. I know each person's going to have different strengths and different gaps.
Do you think that person that helps out the founder must necessarily be a co-founder, or not just CMO, CFO, some other executive team member to kind of do that pushing?
Almost certainly, yes. There are exceptions. I got one or two portfolio companies that were solo founders. They just have other people coming in. And they're doing okay, but arguably maybe they'd be doing better if they had someone else. So the one guy I'm thinking, super sharp, new to the construction industry, actually got started in Latin America, grew, then penetrated the US market, but it took him a while. If his co-founder had deep construction expertise, could he have grown faster? Could he have penetrated the US market faster? Maybe. So I never say never, but again, I'm looking to load the dice. And you load the dice by having that. Now, let's say you bring in a CMO, and you want us to leave a very high-paying six-figure job to come join your startup. A, you don't have the money to pay them, so you got to get them equity. And even if you did have the money to pay them, I would rather have someone come over because they believe so much and they want a piece of your company. They should not be willing to join your company unless you give them equity. And it's like, why am I going to work so hard for you, Cody, and get salary plus bonus? I want the big bucks if we create a unicorn. Right? So if they come and join you, it's almost a yellow flag if they're not getting a significant chunk of equity. Because what you want is people that are so involved in it, they can't sleep at night. And that if there's a problem, they get up in the middle of the night and they can't go back to sleep until they've solved it. And that you only get from people who have serious skin in the game.
To be a good startup founder, you have to be super passionate, right? And just super bought in, like you said.
Mm-hmm.
In your experience working with companies with co-founders, does one ever peter out? Isn't it hard to find? Oh, does it? Okay.
Yeah. Well, so let me give you an analogy, right? I mean, it seems so strange in co-founding, but it's not that different if you think of it this way. A lot of marriages end in divorce. And yet the statistics show that children raised in families that are intact are better off. So yeah, there are a lot of startups with this founder drama. And sometimes the founder drama is irreparable and one leaves. And sometimes it's dramatically irreparable and it kills the company. But still, the company's got better chances of succeeding if you have a good team coming in, which is why other things that we look at, like if the founders have known each other for a long time, that's a plus. Sometimes some VCs won't invest in husband and wife teams because you have that extra layer of drama on top of it. I've actually invested in at least 2 husband-wife teams that I can remember off the top of my head. Ironically, in both cases, the wife was the CEO and the husband was the CTO, but they had both been A, married, and B, working on the startup for several years before I invested. If it were a husband and wife team just getting started and recently married, I would probably just say, I wish you the best of luck.
Are there any other things you look for specifically when 2 founders walk in and give you a pitch together? Where any flags that you look for, I don't know about this?
Yeah, I mean, if they talk over each other and they're not on the same page, that's a huge red flag. In fact, if anyone wants to see, I think one of the best movies about the startup world, it's a documentary called startup.com. It was made shortly after the first internet bubble in 2000, 2001. And it's a documentary about the rise and fall of a startup called GovWorks. And there's a couple of scenes where the founders are there and they're talking about different things in a pitch meeting. And there's this one absurdly hilarious scene where one of the founders is on the phone. He's and the other one, a new asshole about yeah, stop talking about this. We don't do this. And then after 45 seconds of that, he goes, okay, listen, call me back when you get this message. Uh, so, if anyone's done it before, like we've all been in that place, but you got to get yourself on the same page, both to run the business and especially in front of an investor.
At the same time, it's important, you mentioned, for them to kind of push back on each other.
Mm-hmm.
So just keep that private. Know that that's valuable in your conference room, but not in front of an investor.
Yeah, absolutely. Like that forges the better decision. But you got to, once you come to consensus, you got to all get in line and push in the same direction.
Great. I'd love to zero in on a really specific moment when you were being pitched by a startup. Any impactful moment where you were getting pitched and there was just a light bulb, like, wow, this is it. And what wowed you about that? And what can other companies learn from it?
Okay, I've got kind of two scenarios. One I didn't invest in, one I did invest in. The one I didn't invest in, I don't even remember what the original idea was, but we asked the founder, like, hey, what was your earliest entrepreneurial experience? And, we'd gotten a lot of answers like, oh, I had a paper route or, babysitting or what have you. And this guy said, well, when I was in fifth grade, I realized a lot of my buddies came to class and had forgotten to bring pencils. So I bought a box of pencils. I rented it to them for $0.05 a day. Now, bear in mind, didn't sell them, rental. It was pencils as a service. And this is fifth grade. And we didn't really love his startup. But the moment he left, I turned to, the guy I was working with at the time and said, Mark, man, I'm not going to back this startup, but I want to back something else this guy does. So that is if you want to talk about a gut instincts at 10 years old, my God. So that's one story. The other one was one of the companies I first invested in when we started getting into PropTech and construction tech. It's a company called Cherry. I met the founder, super sharp guy. This was his fourth startup. I think two of his startups had exits considerably bigger than my exits. It was a very, this was almost like we're going to do the same startup as startup number two, but we're going to do it in the real estate space rather than, financial services space. So it was a model he knew. I was getting the team back together. He had good early traction. And I remember thinking to myself, I have never had an easier decision. I just need to convince him to take my money.
And that was because it was a proven model, essentially.
Oh, it was an A+ team. It was that it executed in a similar domain with a similar, it was the same play in a different genre, right? The way it played out, similar triggering effects. It was as close as you could get to a redo, and I see the founder quite a bit. And at one point he takes me aside and he's like, hey, you want to see this? And he opens his phone. He's got a picture of the cocktail napkin that he sketched the original concept on. And he goes, and this has never happened to me before, but it's exactly what we executed on, right? It's like calling your shot at, baseball diamond, like Babe Ruth called his shot and the ball went exactly where he said it was going to go. And he hasn't exited yet, so I don't want to jinx it. But that was a light bulb moment. I want this one.
I like that a lot. I'm going back to the guy who mentioned the fifth grade experience, and you said, I'd love to invest in the future. What then do you do from your side? Do you give feedback like that, or do you just start to stalk them on LinkedIn? What's your process then?
In reality, then I dropped the ball entirely. I lost track with him. I don't even remember his name. It's a shame on me. I was early in my career. I would keep in touch with this boy, right? So I gave him feedback. Anyone that we didn't take into the program at that point, but that we actually got to a final or semi-final round interview, we did give personalized feedback to. So we did do that. As I think that was the first time I ran the program for Dream, maybe the second time. As we got more sophisticated about it, we created a whole CRM for how we would reach back out to the founders, especially the ones that we liked, to tell them when we were doing another program. So we got a little bit more sophisticated about that. We used a bunch of different tools to do so. But and this is a long-term business for guys like me. And I make an investment. If I'm lucky, things go really well. In 8 to 10 years, I make a bunch of money. In the meantime, I'm kissing a lot of frogs. Happy to do it. But there's a lot of people I'm out there and I'm paying forward to that first startup fails, they go to work in, corporate, then they're lost to me. Fortunately, I don't mind doing it.
Is there something you see commonly overlooked in pitches where you're just like, not again? And a lot of founders are doing it.
Well, so there was a book I hated to read in high school, and I still hate it. It was a horrible book. It's called Anna Karenina. I mean, it's a Russian soap opera. It's 1,400 pages. I'm exaggerating, but it's got about 1,000 pages. But it has the best first line in any book, like bar none. And it says basically that every happy family is the same. Every unhappy family is unhappy in its own unique way. So I paraphrase that for startups. Like every successful startup is basically the same because they've had to successfully navigate all those issues. Like every link in the chain had to be good. Now, the unsuccessful ones, they all crash and burn for their own unique reasons, sometimes spectacular reasons. So they're all different. I will say that there are a couple of things when I see it in a startup deck, it kind of drives me nuts. So number one, solution not actually answering the problem. Like X is broken, and then like they're doing something else. Number two, the 2x2 matrix on competition, right? It's like, oh, and one of them might be cost or UI. I'm like, yeah, no one thinks their baby is ugly, right? No one thinks they have an ugly your interface, and that's easy enough to fix. Plus pricing, like you can play with pricing. And there's usually more than that. So I strongly recommend you use kind of that matrix where you've got your competition along the top and the benefits along the side, and you show them how you get it. That gives me, you can flip the axes if you want, but like it gives me a sense of like very granularly where you think, emphasis on you think, you are better than the competition in a meaningful way. So competition slides, it's a 2x2 matrix, it's mostly useless. And the last one that drives me nuts is, and there's a funny story about this, is when I see a total addressable market slide that's a TAM, SAM, SOM. You know what I'm talking about? So they'll have like 3 circles, concentric, like babushka dolls, and one's their total addressable market, one is their serviceable addressable market, and the other is their service obtainable market. And to this day, I have not gotten a meaningful and consistent answer as to what the difference is between those 3. However, I will tell you what they are. Here are 2 numbers that are absolutely irrelevant, and a third one which odds are is incorrectly calculated and also irrelevant. So, hey, the T in total addressable market is total. That's what matters. And it's super simple, right? How much do you charge for your product, Cody? $5? Awesome. How many potential buyers are there in all of the US? 1 million? Great. You have a $10 million total addressable market. A times B equals C. It's that simple. None of this BS about like, oh, they spend so much on like, back to school shopping and all you're doing is selling a backpack, right? I don't care about all that. Just how many kids need backpacks every year? How much you charge them? That's it. Really. Do us all a favor. Keep it that simple. And now I'll get off my high horse.
But you see that kind of marketing stuff. I'm a podcast professional, and I go to a website that said, we'll make social media content from your podcast episodes. And I'll be like, well, 700 million people consume social media every day. It's like, I don't think the video you're going to make for me is going to have 700 million views. Just maybe I'm just being a pessimist. I don't know. But that's basically essentially what you're kind of seeing in some of these pitches.
Yeah. Oh, I'm happy to pay you based on how many of them actually see it and subscribe. Oh, yeah, we're not willing to do that. Yeah. Okay. But I joke around that, but it's true also. Like one of the miscellaneous bits of advice I give to startups is that it's always easy to get a customer if you align with what matters to them. Right? So I want to charge you in advance. Hopefully it works. Okay, let me think about it. But if you can price based on a percentage of the value you create, that's super powerful. Now, sometimes there's value to like making them write you a check up front because they're more committed to it. But all other things being equal, if they can pay you out of their winnings, that's awesome.
Well, you mentioned Dreama and a couple other projects you're involved with. I guess, how can people like work with you? Maybe define a couple of the places. You're very involved in lots of organizations. So what's the best way to distill that down?
I'm doing 70 things. I'm going to live. Yeah, I know. I'm a little nuts. I'll make it super actionable, right? So, number one, I'm working with a fund called Second Century Ventures. So Second Century Ventures is the VC arm of the National Association of Realtors, and they run a program called Reach. They run it in the US, they run it in the UK, in Canada, Australia, and Latin America, so it's pretty much global. Soon it'll be Middle East, so it's pretty much global. And it's any kind of technology that keeps the real estate agent central to the transaction, residential, commercial, you name it. So if anyone listening has a really great startup that they want to toss over the fence to me, absolutely they can do so. And it's probably in our strike zone in that regard. So that's number one. My own investing is usually in companies that I've worked with for many years. I'm generally not super open to walk-ins. However, like if it's a really awesome startup, tell me about it. I know, without exaggeration, hundreds of other investors in the space, and I'm happy to pass along the startup to whoever might be a good fit. And who knows? The textbook definition of a VC is I never invest in X, except maybe we'll see. So, I'm happy to take a look also. But I'm really focusing mostly on PropTech and construction tech these days. And the last one, this is a little bit of an outside pitch. I'm also writing a book. It's a novelized version of basically how to build a startup. I'm about 140 pages into it. So it's all the stuff I've done over 10 plus years of coaching and investing, but just written in a more interesting form, probably with fewer curse words in it. So if anyone is a literary agent or a publisher in the business space, very interested in talking to you guys, especially if you're more on the traditional side. I'm leaning towards a traditional publisher over self-publishing or hybrid. So yeah, those are the three main things to keep in mind.
Wow. Congratulations on getting that far. And 150 pages of a book is nothing to sneeze at.
Yeah, well, it's actually kind of funny, right? The book, the fictional startup in the book is a speech-to-text startup, which just happens to be based on a speech-to-text startup I'm working on the side. And because I'm running around between 6 other things, about 80% of the book was written with me dictating into Google Docs using speech-to-text. So fictional speech-to-text startups about a real speech-to-text startup written mostly with speech-to-text.
I can't wait to read the preface or the foreword where you kind of explain that. I live for that kind of stuff.
I have about 70 different forewords for it. I just got to pick one and finish writing the damn book. Other than that, it's all good to go.
That's incredible. Yeah. All right, Andrew. Well, I will include a link to your LinkedIn profile for people to connect with you in today's show notes. And I really appreciate your sense of humor around startup world. I guess it probably helps to have one. Life's
too short to take it seriously.
Those are perfect parting words. So we'll just stop there. Andrew Ackerman, thank you so much for joining me on the Funding Blueprint. And I hope we get a chance to talk again in the future.
Same here. Be well.
The Funding Blueprint is brought to you by StartHub. This episode was produced by me, Cody Goff, with audio and video editing by Sean Patel. If you're looking for sound design or audio video production work, get in touch with Sean at seanpatel.com. You can watch The Funding Blueprint on YouTube or Spotify, or listen on any other podcast app. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, then please open up The Funding Blueprint, scroll down to where you can rate the show, and tap 5 stars to leave a quick rating. We really appreciate it. Thanks for joining, and have a great week.